in the world? Witchfire is pain. If you guys watch my videos, I often throw around words like pain, torment, dick and ball torture, but as of today, I'd like to take all of them back. I've learned my lesson. Because you see, Witchfire is true pain. Not that stepping on the balls or getting triangle choked by an MMA girl type pain, no. This is new pain. What is up, lobotomized gang? It's the guy. You know, the guy who unironically cried when Wolverine punched that robot in Real Steel. He's fighting for his son. To preface this video, I put 8 hours into grinding away in this game, just waiting for it to get good. And it does, at the 6th hour mark, man. But the grind that came before that had to have been some of the most bone-crushingly tedious things that I have ever done in my life. And unlike this guy who watched 5 minutes of my 20-minute video and then complained about how I'm not talking about the point I spent 15 minutes talking about, I actually have some value to contribute to society. So in this video, I'm going to break down 3 biggest problems and their solutions in order to improve this game, Witchfire is soul grinding, all bullets being, stupid name having, forever gun reloading. You have tons of enemies throwing you, but you can't dash or run away because of the out-of-place stamina system that exists only to copy that so and serve no other purposes other than making your experience miserable. Developed by the Astronauts, a small and independent studio located in Warsaw, Poland, who is known for their first game, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, a quote-unquote walking simulator that was well received for its intriguing narrative and excellent environmental storytelling, but was criticized by many for its gameplay, or lack thereof. As at this moment, Witchfire is the team's second game and first ever foray into the roguelike FPS genre, and it really shows. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It is also worth noting that some of the developers have experience working on big AAA first-person shooters like the legendary Painkiller and Bulletstorm, but like the mysterious G-Spot which people often talk about, I have yet to find any trace of that. After a drawn-out and arduous development process starting 9 years ago that was first made public with the trailer that looks absolutely nothing like the game we have now, Witchfire was released onto early access on September 20th, 2023, exclusively on Epic Games Store, whose competitive strategy I briefly touched on in this video. But I gotta admit that the testicle torsion twist was a nice touch, tricking people into thinking it's a walking simulator before whipping out the gat. I wish I could say the same thing for the actual game, but it's just a twisting without a massage. While the hype surrounding the game was somewhat present, it has died down throughout the years. Still, the game has managed to find a fanbase that do really care about its success. I feel like this is one of those titles that have potential to be a great cult classic. Let's face it, it was never gonna reach the heights of Doom or Call of Duty, but it could be on the same level as Destiny or Remnants, with a loyal fanbase that will defend it like it gave birth to them, and pay child support. Like a dark cloud, all-encompassing, ominously looming over the landscape, creating a dark and oppressive atmosphere full of uncertainty, as any wrong move means you're to face certain doom. I'm not talking about your abusive stepdad, by the way. I'm describing the story of Witchfire, at least that's how I think it is. Judging from the aesthetic and the graphical style of the game, I say that the setting of the game is inspired by the Holy Roman Empire witch trials, which took place in the 16th and 17th century, a dark time when between 40,000 and 60,000 people were executed for the crime of witchcraft. Many sources cited that these witch hunts were brought about by many reasons, chief of those being refugees, war, discrimination, as well as religion. Unbeknownst to the rest of humanity, however, this is when the first feminist movement was born, when women realized they were capable of actions such as nagging, behaving passively aggressively, and sass. This discovery led to men wanting to give women equal rights, and with that, equal fights. You don't need to fact check that, okay? I'm 100% it's true. The voices told me so. In true Dark Souls fashion, the story and lore of the game is somewhat opaque. Whatever present here is obscured behind the progression system, the bosses, as well as the environment, something I'll give this game a lot of credit for. If there's a small voice in your mind saying Witchfire looks somewhat familiar, like that girl you hit one time and is now sleeping with your dad, then maybe you'll fit right in with the lobotomized gang. It could also mean that you might have seen this game before. Really comparing these two games side by side, it's quite reasonable to think that The Vanishing of Ethan Carter has great aesthetic influence on Witchfire. I would imagine that making a walking simulator about piecing together clues scattered around the world also massively benefited the team in terms of environmental storytelling. When developing Ethan Carter, the astronauts made extensive use of a technology called photogrammetry in order to create the most realistic in-game environment possible. In layman's term, photogrammetry is analyzing satellite images of real-life locations, then recreating that location based on the data. While an extensive Google search yielded no results indicating that Witchfire utilizes this technology, I suspect that it does play a huge role in the development process, despite the excessive amount of ferocious verbal fisting which I'm about to give this game. The one thing I will say is that the environment, atmosphere, as well as map design is top-notch. Taken inspirations from works of American landscape painters such as Thomas Hill, Albert Bierstadt, and Frederick Edwin Church, the devs have made sure that the game just simply looks amazing. And while it doesn't hold a candle to something like Elden Ring in terms of variety as well as creativity, it's easy to see the amount of effort that was put into crafting a believable and living world. Realistically, there's only so much you can do with the medieval witch trial aesthetic which this game is based on. That is not boring brown huts made out of dirt and straws in the middle of the countryside, but the devs at Astronauts somehow managed to make the locations on the map unique and not repetitive. It goes to say something when in a semi-open world, you never feel like you're truly lost. There's something about the way the environment is designed that makes location interesting and distinct from one another. Which is something that can be said for the enemies because holy hell, I knew that things were grimdark back then, but I didn't know it was this dark, man. Business must be booming for the tailors that run the shows in these villages, because all of these motherfuckers look alike. It's next to impossible to tell any of them apart from a distance. It could be because of my barely open Asian eyes, but it takes quite some time to distinguish enemies from the environment, let alone one another. This is not only an aesthetic problem, but it is also detrimental to the gameplay, which will be discussed in the next section. For now, just keep that in mind, right? You know what? It is simply magical that I have just seamlessly transitioned from complimenting the game to criticizing it in the same breath. Just like how all of the gameplay mechanics just seamlessly contribute to making the core loop worse. Before I say anything negative about this game and the dick riders jump into the comment section to throw hitsy fits without watching the entire video, I'll start with the positive first. Call it foreplay for the pain-free penetration. A concept I'm sure is unfamiliar to these basement lurkers. I think they prefer to take it raw. The shooting feels great. Weapons have that satisfying bass whenever you pull the trigger, and the weapon selection, although limited and somewhat generic, is solid enough to justify the lack of variety. Shit, was that a negative? At the moment, you have 12 weapons in the game, which all fall into the categories we're all so familiar with: pistol, revolver, shotgun, SMG assault rifle, and 2 demonic weapons, which is just a flowery way to say crossbow and rocket launcher. I suspect that this might be subject to change in the future, since the game is still in early access and the devs still have plenty of room to add more insane or at least imaginative weapons into the game. The very least they could do is give us some alternative versions of these weapon types, right? Really think about it. You can't just look at this weapon selection and feel satisfied when you have such an interesting world in which you can absorb the demon semen from the enemies to level up like that guy in Saltburn. I've always been an advocate for crazy and wacky weapon designs, so whenever I see a game with great potential but squanders it with mediocrity for the sake of mass market appeal, I cry a little bit. On the inside, of course, because I'm an omega male and is thus not allowed to show any emotion aside from misogyny. What else is there? The gameplay is great. The gameplay, the shooting. I can't think of anything positive. Come on, focus. The magic. Talk about the magic. The magic, yeah. The magic, how could I forget? The magic is fun. You have magic in this game, yeah. And not that nerdy wizard shit. This is cool magic that you can wield in one hand like a cool guy. You are allowed to equip 2 spells at a time, 1 light spell and 1 heavy spell. Light spells don't deal much damage and lean more towards crowd control. These are intended to be used in combination with heavy spells in order to deal more damage. Heavy spells are only unlocked after some grinding and reaching a certain level. That's a negative. These spells take a long time to recharge, so long that I sometimes forget I even had them in the first place. I know that you can upgrade your stats to make them recharge faster, alright? But just look at it like this. You have a choice between a knife and a gun. Which one would you pick? Sure, the knife is more fun because you get to feel the warmth of their blood and see the last breath leaves their lifeless corpse. But you know, it takes forever to stab somebody to death. So you might as well forget about the knife and use the gun. Furthermore, there are better places to spend upgrade points instead of spell recharge rate, which I'll go in depth about later. I do admit that the heavy spells are very fun to use. Alright, now that's out of the way, it's quite straightforward how we're going to proceed. First of all, this might sound petty, but as you start the game, you're allowed to pick a prayer. These behave similarly to Dark Souls classes, in the sense that they aren't exactly different from one another. Some stats are higher and you can start out with different weapons, but that's about it. This means eventually all builds can turn out the same. Have you seen the problem here? That's right. Prayers. It's like ever since I made a video on the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, I'm cursed to forever talk about games with bad names or something. And what the hell does that mean anyway? Like, I'm a person who's a prey? And since we're people who hunt witches, why not call us something cool like obliterators, right? Eradicators. Vin Diesel, the last witch hunter. Or you know, Witcher. Never mind that, alright? But you know, what was that? Yeah, you have these classes. So I picked this guy, right? Who is said to wield weapons and magic with equal prowess. He also excels at close range combat, which sounds just like my cup of tea. He also has a dumbass looking mask that prevents him from breathing properly because Jesucristo, mira el sistema de resistencia. The stamina system in this game is atrocious. Just take a look at how much stamina it costs when I dash. And this is when I double jump. I'm convinced that I'm just Paul Blart Mall Cop under the mask. This might not look all that bad at first, but as soon as you go into your first combat encounter, problems big as my dick start to poke their heads out uninvited. See, similar to Olivia, who peaked in high school and is now a Z-Zamzer crack hole on the corner of the street.
I'm Cody, pronouns em, airs, or Z-Zamzer.
Witchfire doesn't know what it wants to be. I'll tell you what it wants to be. It wants to be a movement shooter in the veins of Doom. It surely presents itself that way with the multiple enemy types, each serving a different role with their unique behaviors and attack patterns. You have these guys, right, that can shoot you from afar, and these kangaroo guys that charge at you to occupy space and create pressure. Classic FPS enemy design. This means you have good mobility in order to outmaneuver them, right? Wrong. You can't, because you have the athleticism of a disabled Reddit mod and runs out of stamina every time you jump or dash. In addition to that, your dashes and double jumps cancel your weapon's reload, which is already very slow to begin with. Dashing and double jumping cancel your weapon reload, and this problem is exacerbated when you use weapons like the shotgun, which I'm sure was made by Dyson because it sucks. Seriously, the shotgun only has 8 shells, but it takes 2 to 3 shots to kill an enemy, even with the barrel shoved directly down their throat. And you have to put individual bullets into the shotgun when you reload. So this forms a perpetual cycle of torment when you can't dash away because it will cancel your weapon's reload, and you can't shoot because you have no shell left. So you switch to your secondary weapons, right? Which takes bullets to kill a single enemy. Okay, let me elaborate further. The reason why the stamina system in Dark Souls works because the combat encounters in that game incentivizes strategy and positioning as opposed to twitch reflexes like in Witchfire. You often fight 1 or 2 enemies at most, and the fights are slow paced. So the stamina system forces you to think ahead instead of going full guerrilla mode on the enemies. Whereas in a movement shooter like Witchfire, with multiple enemies constantly bum rushing you from all directions, the stamina system exists only to limit your mobility and be a nuisance. And when it takes an entire business day to kill a single enemy with headshots, you have yourself a punishingly difficult game for all the wrong reasons. To be fair, this was somewhat alleviated when I went back and picked a different class, the Butcher, who begins the game with a lot more stamina and is able to move around much more easily, the downside being he doesn't have any spell. Nevertheless, the stamina problem always managed to creep up and take me from behind whenever an iota of fun was being felt. It's like, get a life, Alex. I told you we're done. Get out of my life already. God. Should you decide to give this game a try, I recommend putting all of your upgrade points into stamina at first. And I feel like this frustration could easily be circumvented by just simply decreasing the amount of stamina it costs to dash and double jump, while also allowing you to reload when dashing. Whew. 1 down, 2 more to go. I rarely second guess myself whenever I decide to form an opinion on something, but could you please kindly play this game and tell me that I'm not crazy, right? Which is not true. Unlike subscribing and liking this video, which is free, Witchfire is $40 on the Epic Game Store as of this review. The ranged yapping aside, I think you should give this game a chance. There are things here that I'm pretty sure people with different tastes than mine can truly appreciate. If you like grindy roguelike games with poorly thought out gameplay mechanics, this might be right up your alley. And speaking of roguelike, unlike Dark Souls, you don't have an interconnected world in Witchfire. You go on expeditions with semi-randomized elements each time, which leads us to the next problem. Let me set the scene. I open the map to check where to go, right? And among the randomized combat encounters is this icon. Surely this must be where I need to go. I then make my way to the location on the map, tediously and sluggishly, mind you, because you can't sprint when out of stamina. And that shit goes down faster than the attention span of the average teenager nowadays. As I arrived at the spot, I am greeted with this message: requires Gnosis level 1. So I check the map again and voila! There. You don't see it? There it is! There! Goal! Diddly. See, Gnosis is like a level of sorts, so there are multiple levels of it. And in order to reach it, you need to do some grinding. About 17,000 currency worth of grinding, which is not too much, I reluctantly admit. Do you see the problem here? they drop you into the map and expect you to grind it out. Ask your question, do you know what kind of games base their progression system on grinding? Yeah, you got that right. Free-to-play mobile games. The Warframe does the same thing. Gentlemen, please, it is with the utmost humility and respect that I kindly ask you to shut the f*** up. Firstly, Warframe is a free-to-play game. And secondly, it has some actual content and variety. In contrast, there's not much you can do in Witchfire that is not running around and shooting the same enemies with the same weapons you've been using since you started the game. Here, you can only carry 3 weapons at a time, and the 3rd weapon requires a ton of grinding to unlock. How does that work, you ask? You can send these letters to your headquarters and ask them to research new weapons, but they must have hired Chick-fil-A employees to manufacture your guns because it takes forever to research a new one. And guess how you can speed this up? Take a wild guess. Yup, that's right, more grinding. This time is grinding for coins. Okay. So what happens when you unlock the Gnosis level 1? You unlock the seal, you drop down this hole and are faced with the first boss of the game. The same enemy you've been fighting for the past 2 hours. See, despite having godlike reflexes and more than 300 IQ, I couldn't win this fight. Was it because I ran out of bullets before the boss could die? Or because the minions disabled my ability to dash and jump? Or could it be that the visual effects were so insane that I couldn't even see an enemy even if it farted in my face? It could be all the above, or it could be that I didn't obtain enough manifestations. These are randomized modifiers that accumulate to turn your overweight asthmatic sloth into Bloodlord Kyriakos Grizzly. If you had paid any attention, I placed a heavy emphasis on randomized, because it truly is The buffs are randomized each time, and whether you get the buff or not is also randomized. You can unlock the third randomized buff as well as randomize the randomized buff using this feather with a randomized drop rate. You see where this is going? I certainly don't, because like I said before, combat encounters are also randomized. All of this means that you can travel and fight for hours without stumbling upon a single buff, or you could get a buff right after inflicting gang violence on the very first op you encounter. Only now do I realize that another problem just came up when I was talking about the second one. Again, not to be a negative Nancy or anything, but I'm truly amazed by how seamlessly these problems flow from one to another. Cynical as I am, I do get why the devs wanted you to grind it out at first. It is obvious that they wanted you to get used to the combat and the movement system before throwing you into the deep end to get sodomized by the first boss. But you know, I feel like they could have done something better to make a good first impression instead of just, making you go grind. Just make a tutorial map. Imagine, right? You start the game as an apprentice on a mission to hunt down a low-level witch. Not only would it be the thematic way to throw you straight into the action, it would also serve to familiarize you with the game's core mechanics. As for the randomization aspect of the game, I can't do anything about that because it's an integral part of the roguelike experience. Players who enjoy roguelikes come for the randomization aspect of the game. It would be foolish to deprive them of this. Unlike Horizon Forbidden West, a game that tries its damnedest to deter you from engaging with its best gameplay mechanic, which is fighting giant robot dinosaurs. Now that's out of the way, how about we move on to something a little bit more positive before tag teaming the final problem, right? Known around the world for its many delights, chief of which are the numerous picturesque sites, Viking legends, meatballs, IKEA, and PewDiePie. Sweden is a country not unfamiliar to many. Unfortunately, in recent years, the escalation and severity of gang violence has gotten to a point beyond the control of the government, whose police force struggles to maintain peace and civility on the blood-soaked streets of the country's once peaceful cities. In 2022, an interview with a gang member referred to as Adam revealed that almost anyone who has resigned to a life of crime would gladly take someone else's life, as the reward greatly outweighs the consequences. Adam stated that each job he takes nets him 1 million Swedish krona, the equivalent of $187,000. For gangsters like him, gun violence is nothing but a business opportunity. In fact, Sweden's gun crime death rate is now the highest in the European Union. It is reported that about 62,000 people are linked to the criminal networks in the country. It is not usual for the average suburban citizen to be awakened by echoing of gunshots throughout the neighborhood. A sound that the developers of Witchfire definitely nailed, because the weapons in this game sound phenomenal. It is the sound effects that truly save the gameplay and take the shooting to the next level. Have a listen. A cool little detail that I like to mention is the breathing sound you make when you're out of breath. Like, take off the damn mask, man! This Count Dr. Doom looking at. You're not him. Forget them witches. Whoever designed that war crime against fashion should be burned at the stake. True to the purple experience here, the game went through somewhat of a drawn-out and painful development process that is still going on. According to the only source I could find, this game was initially designed as a post-apocalyptic science fiction survival simulator codenamed Astro Project 2, something that would bear absolutely zero resemblance to the game we're talking about today had it come to fruition. It is ambiguous whether this drastic shift in direction was due to internal conflicts within the studio or external factors such as the ever-changing nature of video game trends. But I like to imagine that the devs looked at the relatively big success of Fallout 4, then let out a collective sigh before silently burning the PCs and laptops while mumbling curses and death threats, and that's how they came up with the idea for Witchfire. As of 2019, the team at The Astronauts consists of less than 20 people, which is commendable considering the state the game is in right now. Though progress is slow, I'm sure that the devs will manage to produce something worth your while, with the caveat that they make a few tweaks to the core gameplay loop. And speaking of gameplay, You remember this? Yeah, you better get used to seeing that, because you're gonna be seeing that a lot. The problem with enemies taking an entire business day to die is that at some point, your already limited ammo reserve will run out faster than your patience. Patience is the key word here, because the game will surely put it to the test. These are ammo traps, so when you run out of ammo, you're expected to visit these spots for more. Сейчас садитесь и немного подумайте об этом. This kills the entire pace of the game, because it essentially forces you to literally stop playing the game and run to one of these locations every time you're low on ammo. It also doesn't even have the decency to respect your time, because as mentioned before, the stamina system will grab you by the balls if you even dare to think about getting around quickly. Yes, I am aware that there are enemies that drop ammo when you kill them, but the amount of ammo they drop is South Sudan poor compared to the number of bullets it takes to send a single enemy to the Shadow Realm. You've been gravely mistaken for thinking that this is like Doom Eternal, where you can replenish enough ammo just to keep going. What's gonna happen is you finding yourself, dick in hand, stuck in a perpetual cycle of picking up the same number of bullets you used to kill the enemies over and over and over again, questioning why you're putting yourself through this 18th layer of Buddhism hell. And why do we even have this problem anyway? Just make the stamina unlimited outside of combat. You can make enemies drop more ammo on death, you can increase the number of ammo drops on the map, or just get rid of that and have ammo pickup like a normal video game. Or better yet, you can make ammo pickup a part of the exploration. This way, players are rewarded for engaging with the beautiful world you have crafted, instead of just mindlessly running to a marked location on the map. I like this game, and I really want it to succeed. There's just something about people putting their heart and soul into doing something they are passionate about that gets the blood pumping in all the right places. You know what I'm talking about? But like the crackhole Olivia, even though she's fun to be around, you can't exactly bring her home to your parents. Maybe in the future when she has taken a shower and cleaned up her act. Otherwise, to the void of obscurity you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment and I'll make a video answering it, okay? Bonus point if it's deranged. Watch my other videos here. The uncensored version is on the Patreon, so check it out. I sincerely thank you for watching. Subscribe and stay tuned to witness my gradual descent into insanity. See you guys in your sleep.